and welcome everyone. Welcome Sensor for this new episode of Mindless Function Guest. I'm very happy because we have this new session every month where we ask one of you, one sensor, to come and share their knowledge or something that is important for them, and especially something that will help us expand our minds. So I'm very happy to have today my fellow country person, Ilaria Biancacci. Welcome. And if you can, please just give us a little introduction. Tell us who you are, what your focus is, so that we get to know you a little bit better. We're always very happy to meet new sensors.
Thank you so much, Gioia, for having me here. And it's always a pleasure to share a platform with someone from your same country. Makes things a little bit easier sometimes. So a little bit about me. So I'm from Italy. I came here to the UK 8 years ago, but I still don't consider myself fully 100% a Londoner yet. And I am a journalist and the founder of Wempower. Wempower is a platform that focuses on stories of ordinary women that are changing the world. And the reason why I embark on this entrepreneurial journey, launching this media company, is because I believe that there is a need for more inclusive, positive, and inspirational news about women. And because I want to change the narrative on women's rights and gender issue by bringing stories that they do resonate with all of us a little bit more, because they represent all of us. And I want to empower young female journalists to access and progress into leadership roles within the newsroom, but in general, to progress and access a career that has been for too long too male dominated. So in a nutshell, this is me.
Wow, super interesting. And I also noticed that this pattern that we have seen with Sensor, that they need to, very often they are expat or been like living in different countries. I mean, this is really empirical, but there is a high percentage of this pattern in Sensor. And maybe there is some correlation with having an open mind, because when you're exposed to, different people, different culture, this is when you start thinking, okay, maybe my vision is not the only one. Is this something that also happened to you personally and that maybe moved you in the direction of your activism?
100%. This has been part of myself since I was very young. I moved out from my hometown when I was 18. So already that changed a little bit my perspective. So I moved from a small town in Sardinia to Rome, which was, a very big challenge and change at that time. And then from there, I went to live in Turkey to work as a journalist, and Turkey was another completely different environment and culture. And obviously my mind, my vision, my perspective of the world changed completely. And I never stopped traveling and going to places that I didn't know, because I believe that only like that you just, as you say, you have the possibility to know more, ask questions, and think that your perspective is not the only one in the world. So yeah, 100% on board with this.
So I'm really curious now to know, especially hearing your story and all the different experience that you did so far. What is the topic of this session today? What would you like to share with us?
So I decided to share to talk to you a little bit more about why representation matters, and especially in the context of news and media, because this is my area of expertise. So it would be a conversation on why it is important and what you can actually do, whether you are a journalist or you're just consuming news, or even if you work for another company in another sector, how you can actually promote more meaningful representation.
I'm all for this. And I'm also aware that we have so many different people in the network, even students. So I would ask you, if possible, to just give a brief explanation of what representation is. What is the meaning of representation? Because maybe not everybody knows about that.
Yeah, representation is when your experience, your culture, and your person is represented, either in the culture of a workplace, on the news, in the media, is the possibility for you to watch something and recognize yourself in that thing. So I think that the most easiest way to describe representation for me would be this, you know, you open a magazine, you switch on the TV and you see someone that looks and sounds like you, and you read stories that they relate to you, and you have representation is also, it goes hand in hand with equality and equity. So even the possibility that if you see something happen to someone that look like you, then you know that there is the possibility also for you to achieve that. So.
Oh, that's so relevant. And I remember just recently there was this viral video being shown of little black girls seeing the new version of The Little Mermaid with a black actress, and how important it was for them. It was really moving to see themselves in the screen. Like, of course, it's not a real character, but it's a character that for kids is super important because it's part of, you know, of their imagination. And so even being able to imagine themselves as a prince, a Disney princess, is probably something that it's hard to understand if you never, you know, felt like you weren't there on the screen. So I totally believe in how important this might be. But definitely there are so many different examples. So this is probably just one that everybody saw because it was doing the round, you know, social medias, and it was really moving. So, but I'm quite sure that you have other examples to share with us. So the stage is yours.
Even if you, on the following up from what you just said, if you think about school books as well, or books that the children read, sometimes, you know, the character that they choose to represent, they are not actually really representative of all the population, all the cultures, all the colors, all the faith. So it's incredible to know that right now there are many maybe self-funded publishing company, or like new some entrepreneurs, some new startups that are trying to bring diversity and representation in more fields. And it's really needed because the world is changing. So yeah, I completely agree with what you say. I mean, The Little Mermaid is a very simple example, but you know, if you insinuate those bias in the mind of the kids when they're very little, they're gonna grow up thinking they can't do it. But if you show them that there is the possibility, then it is another world generation. So,
and I have to say that your angle is, at least for me, was very important, because even if I was aware of representation in some instances, if, like we say, it's a conversation that's happening now, thank God. So we're happy about that. But I've never paused and think about, it's not just the kind of news that's presented to you, but also who is responsible for delivering the news. So I realized, for instance, I don't know if this is something that you have ever, probably has, that I consume a lot of news online, and sometimes even printed, because I'm a bit like old-fashioned, even printed is, but very rarely I stop and check the name of the journalist that wrote that news. And I'm quite sure if I start doing it now, even in Italy or in the UK, I mean, the percentage of men would be like overwhelming. And we're not even going to different kind of representation, just stick it to the gender, like men and women. I'm quite sure there is a lot of difference there, but this is probably something that you can tell us more about.
Look, on following what you just say, if we all close our eyes 1 second, no? And I tell you to think about a journalist, tell me what's the first image that comes to your mind. I believe that the chances that the first person that appears in front of you is a white middle-aged man, it's probably really high. Am I right?
Yes, unfortunately.
Unfortunately. But the question is this really representative of who you are, Gioia, of who I am, myself, Ilaria, or everyone else that is listening to us today? I don't think so, because society is made of so many different perspectives and, you know, cultures and people. So for me, what is really important to share is that, as you say, sometimes we don't pay attention to who is behind the news. And I hope at the end of this talk, we're all going to see and you know, Google the name of the person that wrote that article to actually see if that magazine, if that news outlet is really representing all the people that they are talking to. Because if you look at the recent numbers published by the National Council for the Training of Journalists, it says that 80% of journalists come from a professional and upper class background. It means the journalism is still an elite job, and it's still something that is stereotyped into the white middle-aged class men. But this is not really representative of the workforce in the UK, and not even of the news and the things that are happening in the world. And the thing is, if you miss to represent that diversity, you also miss out on reaching out to different audience. And for me, this is what is really important as well, and why we need more representation in the media. From my personal experience, I tell you that media are the mirror through what we look the world. And we cannot say that confidently that this is a true vision and is a true narrative, because it's always shaped by a specific group of people. And if everyone else is left out, then we have an unfairly representation. So when I'm talking about representation, think about different group of different people. So we can look at gender, and as you mentioned before as well, the percentage of women journalists is still very low, although the number are increasing of young students accessing the career and, you know, going into universities to study journalism. The number of women that actually progress into leadership role in the newsroom is still very low. So there are not enough women on the news and writing news yet. But then when we dig deeper and we think about, I don't know, people of color, LGBTQ plus communities, people with a different range of body shapes and types, people of non-Christian religions or faith, and different able people, do you see them represented in the news? And do you see them writing the news? Because as I say before, if you don't put together those people in the room defining the agenda of the news, then obviously the narrative that you will have afterwards is biased and is not complete. And so what I want to also highlight is, I don't want then representation to be like an exercise where we just tick the box. You know what I mean? Like, okay, we're going to start hiring more underrepresented communities to write the news, or we're going to hire a tot percentage of disabled people to come and work with us, because that's not really how you're going to bring representation into your newsroom and into the news that you're writing. And also we need to be really careful that representation doesn't come as a stereotype, or when you are trying to put someone into a box because it belongs to that specific group of people, so they can only write and talk about a specific topic. For example, when you think about women in the news, they're always associated with more glamorous and soft news. It's still very complicated to recognize that women can write confidently and talk about geopolitics, finance, sports, or they can be successful war reporters, for example, because the bias, the stereotype is the women should, you know, write about something a little bit more feminine. So when you actually put people in boxes and you just ask them to do the same thing and to write about the same things repeatedly, obviously there's not going to be any change, right?
You're right. And is there a name for this practice? Because I remember we had this conversation beforehand, and you were coming up with very interesting terminology that I think we should all be aware of. So
Yes.
How would you define this?
Putting someone in a box is called typecasting. So it is something that is very common across all media. And if you think about it, even in movies, in cinemas, you know, they are specific people that they are repeatedly assigned the same type of role, due maybe to a success with the previous role in the past, or maybe because they look like a specific stereotype. And then the other term that, you know, I was using before is obviously stereotyping. So when you, I don't know, you think about me, I'm an Italian woman, you probably think I'm a super loud, I'm moving a lot like I'm already doing here right now. And I don't know, you might define me in a way that is not actually the definition of all the Italian women, you know, or when you look at Muslim people, stereotyping them in the news as being like done from a very, very negative and harmful position, because we put them into some stereotypes. They come from the news that we hear, and they are not completely the truth, but it make you think that all people belonging to that category are like that. So it is they are very dangerous way.
Assumption, yes,
Yeah.
you're right. And is also tokenism a part of this narrative?
Yeah, so tokenism is like, for me, what will explain better tokenism is also, just tick the box. Okay, we need 50% of women on board. Tick, is done. And it's a token. It's like, I have you on board because I need to show that I'm making an effort to have a more equal and diverse team, or a more equal and diverse narrative. So they told me that to be more inclusive, I need to hire more Black, African, Caribbean people. I will do that. But tokenism is dangerous because you do it, companies do it just to tick a box and just to make something look symbolic. And it's more also for advertising and for to show the world that they are doing great. But then is actually how then those people are nurtured, or they have possibility to grow, to progress in their careers. And, and if they actually, going back to equity, what I was saying before is, do they actually also deserve to be in that position? Because sometimes tokenism can be harmful in the way that we put someone in a position just because he's a representative of that group of people, but maybe doesn't have the skills, maybe it's not the right person for the role. So then the domino effect after this is quite dangerous.
Wow, yeah, it's so true. And I also, aware of the fact that sometimes like companies or even institutions have this tendency of, in a sense, jumping on on the situation, like when we have, for instance, now we just had in the UK the Black History Month. There is also, I think it's in February in the US, so it might depend in different countries, and then Pride Month. And you see in those moments, like everybody's trying to enter the conversation, but I'm more interested in seeing what they do in the other 11 months. So then, just because there is a special focus, I mean, it's important to have this kind of, recognition, but it shouldn't stop there. It's just like,
I completely agree. For example, do you remember when during the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020 after John Floyd death? Before that, I think the number of Black reporters and Black journalists, and that they had the possibility to write columns on newspaper or intervene during TV programs as an expert, was, I think, 0. Now, like very, very low. And in the month following George Floyd assassination, this percentage drastically changed and increased, but then it just went back to be 0. Because, as you said, there is this idea that, okay, yes, it's Black History Month, it's Pride Month, it's Movember, it's mental health awareness, it's this and that, but we cannot do this once a year. It should be always like that. So if you decide to bring more diverse voices into, your newsroom, or to send more diverse reporters on the ground, you need to do that constantly, because otherwise it's just we will never grow. It will take centuries probably to get to a point where we have a truly representative newsroom. And we need to do this now, because the world is rapidly changing, and you cannot just talk to half of the population, not even half of it, actually, sometimes.
Very true. And I see you're very passionate about this. I'm happy to see this. And I wanted to ask you, can you share a little bit more about your initiative in this area? Because I think it might be interesting for some censor might really want to be more involved. So tell us more.
The reason why I'm so passionate about representation is because when I was working as a journalist in Italy, I actually did face some sexism and some obstacles due to my gender. I was moving my first step as a journalist into a field. I was writing about geopolitics and Middle East, and work as embedded journalist with the Italian army. So definitely not a feminine, sphere of interest. And every time I step into a room, I remember to be not the only woman, but perhaps sometimes the only woman, and sometimes it was just 2 or 3 of us. And the way senior and fellow journalists will look at us, it made me feel very uncomfortable. And I think that was the moment where I decided I need to do something to change this. Perhaps it's not happening now that I'm 19, 20. It's gonna take me some time, you know, to develop the tools and the knowledge to start fighting this. But eventually I did it. So in March 2020, I was at home in furlough, so no job, right into the pandemic. And I had no excuses anymore to say, hey, I don't have time, I don't have the skills. And I say, okay, let's just do this. And I created a platform that focused on stories of women, but those women are like me, like you, like any other woman that is listening and watching us today. And what is really important for me is that you can read the articles published on the website, you can listen to the podcast that we create and think like, wow, she's like me. She did it, I can do it. So this is the message that I want from all the stories that we're sharing on Wempower to come through. And it's really, it's what drives me and what I'm passionate about. And I'm not looking for this super famous women without, you know, taking away anything from them. But I want to showcase stories of women that they just, you know, lift themselves up. They are working for the communities. They are, you know, on a grassroots level, because if we want change to happen, we need to start sharing stories of people, not just women, but people in general, that they are working in the community, because changes come from down up, not the other way around. Otherwise, it's an imposed change, and we actually need to feel it. So I am if you want to know more, you can go on my website. It's www.wempower.co. You find Wempower on all social media platforms. Feel free, you know, to just get in touch with me if you want to know more about the stories we share and what we're doing. And as part of my aim, I also established a partnership with the Nottingham University, where all the students from the media and the journalism department, they can come and do an internship with Wempower or a work placement in order to work on their skills, learn something new, and what actually makes me also happy, give them the opportunity to write about what they love. Because sometimes when you go to the newsroom, it's more like, okay, you need to write about this story. And if you don't feel it, you're not going to write it in the same way as if you are really passionate about something. So
yes, it's so important to own the narrative. I understand from your words, so it's powerful. Of course, we're going to share all the relevant link in the text accompanying this video, so people will be able just to click and come and see the ecosystem that you are creating. I was just wondering, do you have any other recommendation for Censor that would like to explore this topic more? Maybe, I don't know, either books, movies, documentary, anything you can think of that can help us expand the mind, because this is our big you know, our big challenge. We want people to meet different perspective and be exposed to different way of thinking, because we believe this is very good for our brain and also for the way we approach other people.
So I was never a number person before I actually, but I realized that sometimes numbers are quite, you know, they're just there in front of you and you can't deny them. And 2 books that really inspire me and I think will give you a different perspective on so many things happening around us. One is The Authority Gap, and the other one is Invisible Women. So both of them, they look at ways, The Invisible Women looks at how women are not represented and not taken into consideration in every aspect of our life. Think about, I don't know, even the way the seatbelts are designed in the cars. They are not tested on women. And this is something that maybe you don't think about too often. But then when you read this book, you actually realize why you're really struggling with your seatbelt here under your neck every time. And it's an interesting book to make you understand how what we are doing to the world, ignoring half of it. The authority gap is more to see why women are not progressing into leadership position, and what we can actually do to ensure we do have more representation. And obviously, the gender perspective is very dear to my heart, but I'm sure it will give you also a lot of insights to understand different topics. And I put down another book, and it's called Eyes Wide Open by Isaac Lidsky-Weather. And so he became blind when he was very young, and he tells his stories on how fear and of becoming blind made him realize how he could actually see in another world, in another way. So very similar to what you said at the beginning, that when we travel, when we move to another country, we need to adapt to a different culture and let go of our stereotypes and bias. So in this very personal journey that becoming blind in an adult age, he realized what actually he could do with the other senses to make sure he was not coming out from a fear emotion. He could actually make something positive out of it. And so I find these books really inspirational. I can go and give you a million of titles, so maybe I can drop some in the
Yeah, absolutely. So if you can think, of course, send them over. I will put it in a test, because books, movies, some people, some sensor are more visual oriented, so they might prefer this kind of, or there are audiobooks, of course, podcasts. You also mentioned yours. So we are open to support people in their journey of acquiring new knowledge in different formats, because we believe this is also part of the conversation of representing, especially as you say, that some people might be impaired in some of their senses. So it's important to take everybody into account. Exactly. Ilaria, this has been brilliant. Thank you so much, because of course, what we would like to obtain from this talk is that people get a little bit curious and explore. So it's an invitation to explore, to find resources, and of course we're going to provide some, but from that moment on, what would you like people to be more aware of from now on? If you can share your message now with our sensor, if you have any invitation or call to action for them, what would you like everybody to do maybe from now on?
Well, maybe an exercise that you can do is, if you buy a newspaper or if you read articles online, go and look at who wrote the article and try to have an idea of who is behind the news, which sometimes, we take that for granted, but the person that is behind the news is the one that is dictating the narrative, and the people that are behind the person writing the news are even more responsible for that. So just be aware. And another thing's really important, and as a journalist, I never stop asking questions. Sometimes if you don't know something, if you don't understand something, just ask and be curious, be open-minded, because we are, our truth is not the only truth, it's our experience, and we all together contribute to the reality we live. So ask questions a lot, don't be scared about that. And one thing that I started doing, especially here in London as well, is to go to events, and could be networking events, a book presentation, movie, that they are outside your tunnel vision, so that you can explore different cultures, different perspectives, different point of views, and you can learn. You're gonna go home for sure that you learn at least one new thing about that person, or so just be open and put yourself into an uncomfortable position, because only when we are uncomfortable we are really learning something. So I would say that this is
wow, spoken as a true sensor. So my next question for you is, how long have you been in the Sense Network? Because you were really sharing all our values in this little speech. So it's oh, she's representing again for representation perfectly.
I say I'm actually the representation of, if you want to do something, you can achieve it. I am a member probably for 1 week, 10 days now.
I'm so proud. It means that we are attracting the right people because you are totally aligned with our values. But this will also help me, and I think it's very important. So I'm gonna re-invite Sensor that are watching this video to reach out to me. You can DM me on the platform. You can send me an email, whatever you prefer. If you have a topic you're really passionate about, and I think Ilaria is really, setting the stage here, something that you feel like I want to communicate this to people. I want to give tools or, a source of inspiration. Please do reach out. It doesn't matter if you've been in the network for several years or just arrived. What is important for us is that we believe that everyone coming to the network has a set of knowledge and of tools and passion. And so I'm quite sure that everyone has at least one topic they can be able to come up with a talk on the spot. That's definitely what you're supposed to share. So Ilaria, thank you for setting the example, because now you have no excuses. She's a total newbie, but she was like, okay, I'm gonna share this. So thank you so much again. Of course, I will invite people, if they have other question or something, or resources, extra resources they want to share, use the comment section that is below this video so that we can carry on the conversation. And of course, whenever Ilaria comes and have a look, she might carry on the conversation with you. And of course, you will find her links so you can go and see whatever she's doing, support her in any possible way. Ilaria, it has been a pleasure.
Gioia, thank you so much for having me, really. And
you may be muted for a second, but now we can hear it again. So thank you so much for being with us. Of course, now that you're in the network, you can't leave the network. We want you with us.
No, it's not coming back.
And thank you again. And I will definitely now, whenever I approach the news, be mindful of your invitation or your suggestion.
Thank you.
Big kiss, ciao, from these Italians, but other Italian. I think Italy has been represented today.
100%. Bye-bye.
Thank you.